Hi, everyone. It's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. Welcome back, or welcome if you are new here. I got a lot of positive feedback on the last few National Lifeguard related videos, and I had a request to talk about NL scenarios or situations. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. My personal experience as a National Lifeguard instructor, National Lifeguard instructor trainer, as well as a National Lifeguard for over 20 years does not mean that this video is endorsed by the Lifesaving Society of Alberta, Northwest Territories, or Lifesaving Society Canada. I'm making this video with my own opinions, experience, and advice to candidates who are looking for ways to better prepare for their National Lifeguard class. This is a common point of stress when it comes to the National Lifeguard Award. Candidates know that situations or scenarios make up a significant portion of the evaluation process in terms of their success at achieving the National Lifeguard Award, but there's often a lot of confusion because there is insufficient transparency, in my opinion, on the part of some National Lifeguard instructors communicating to their candidates what the award guide items are, as well as the must-see items. I'm here today to shed some light on these items. Your specific province may have different program requirements in terms of exams or third-party examiners. What I'm going to speak to is the National Lifeguard Award in terms of the curriculum, the award guide, the must-sees at the time that I'm recording this in April 2025. I am located in Alberta and the Northwest Territories. Although the program is national, there are branch variations, so do be aware of that. For simplicity's sake, in the rest of this video, I'm going to be using the terms NL to refer to the National Lifeguard Award. I'm going to be using the terminology NLI to refer to a National Lifeguard instructor, and I'm going to be using the terminology NLIT to refer to a National Lifeguard instructor trainer. So I have been an NL award holder since 2003. I have over 20 years of experience recertifying, as in attending recerts, attending staff in service, as well as over 10 years of experience as an NLI and NLIT. The other piece is I have done a lot of mentorships where I go and co-teach with a new NLI candidate. So a lot of my experience in this video is going to draw upon the fact that sometimes NLIs themselves don't realize that they could do a better job in preparing candidates for lifeguard scenarios. And we're all human, we're all growing, but in many cases, we could all do better in terms of assuaging the fears, the frustrations, the concerns from candidates who do want to be successful. They do want to become NL award holders. They have invested 40 hours already achieving intermediate first aid, formerly standard first aid, bronze medallion, and bronze cross, now assistant lifeguard. They've spent a lot of time, money, and effort, and then to be worried that you're going to fail your NL course because you don't know what to do for scenarios is, I think, a very legitimate concern on the part of candidates. So we as NLIs and NLITs should be doing a better job communicating what those situations are. To start, situations is a specific award guide item that I want to speak to. So I'm going to be referring here to the National Lifeguard Award Guide. This is the current edition I'm using here in Alberta and the Northwest Territories. In the program revisions a few years ago, there are now 2 items that comprise the National Lifeguard situations or scenarios. So throughout this video, I am going to be reading directly from the award guide, and I will do my best to put excerpts on the screen for your reference. I should also clarify that this entire video is focused on National Lifeguard pool option. That doesn't mean that some of this might not apply in other options like surf or waterfront, but I am not qualified in the other 3 options, so I can only speak to my personal and direct experience as a National Lifeguard Award holder in the pool option. So there are 2 award guide items that successful NL candidates should be able to complete. They are going to be items A, lifeguard situations single guard, and item B, lifeguard situations team. This is a change in the last few years. Previously, situations were unspecified. So there was a lot of inconsistency in NL courses where some instructors or some trainers were making an effort to have a variety of situations and scenarios with different pool setups. But I would say the default tended to be a multi-guard situation, which is now the lifeguard situations team environment. I'm going to start by reading the award guide criteria for 12A. We're going to talk about that, and then we're going to look at the award guide criteria for item 12B. From there, I am going to talk about the variety of situations that I typically program as an NLI who's conducting an NL original course. And I'm also going to give some suggestions for NLIs who might be watching this video about some of the things we should and should not be doing when it comes to designing our situations to be realistic to an aquatic environment, as well as making sure that we are adequately assessing the competency of our candidates, but not creating completely bizarre scenarios that have no purpose. A quick reminder, if you haven't watched one of my other videos, the award guide is the only criteria by which you should be evaluated if you are participating in a national lifeguard course. Your NLI should be using actively on the pool deck and referencing a current edition of the award guide. This is not secret. If you would like to ask your instructor to see a copy of a specific page, to take a photo, to take a photocopy for your own preparation, they cannot hand you the entire book because it is intellectual property of the Lifesaving Society, but I have certainly given out individual portions or pages to candidates who require remedial practice. How else can they study? How else can they prepare? And that is my goal with this video, is to assist those of you who endeavor to be successful but don't know what you're doing, to get some ideas from this video how you can better prepare. When you are looking at the award guide page, there are a number of items to briefly mention. So the italics at the top tells us what the item is in terms of a description. As a single lifeguard, respond to a situation in a supervised aquatic setting with one auxiliary staff member. Then the page goes on to specify the purpose. The purpose of this item is to ensure lifeguards can apply lifeguard principles and practices in emergency situations. For us as instructors, the learning outcome is that the candidate demonstrates appropriate judgment, knowledge, skill, and fitness while responding to emergencies in a pool environment. From there, we go on to the must-sees. A must-see is something that we as NLIs must see every single time in a scenario for that scenario to be marked off as successful. So if any of these items are missing, that scenario cannot necessarily be marked as successful. Now, there is a trajectory to getting you to that point as a candidate. We don't expect as NLIs that the first time you do a situation or scenario that you're going to get it all, but that is part of the training process that we have to create as instructors, that you have the opportunity to practice and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to get to that point by the end of your NL original course, whether that is the final day of class or whether that is a formal assessment situation such as an exam. The must-see items for lifeguard situation single guard are effective lifeguard positioning, effective observation skills and scanning techniques, timely recognition and appropriate response, leadership in the management of the situation, effective communication with auxiliary staff, victims, patrons, and bystanders, appropriate selection and effective demonstration of rescue techniques and use of equipment, effective use of barrier devices, e.g. pocket mask and gloves, appropriate first aid treatment if required, accurate communication with EMS if appropriate at the earliest possible moment, continued safety supervision of other patrons throughout or water cleared, concern for good public relations, accurate reporting, and appropriate follow-up. Before discussing those must-sees, I'm going to touch on the notes. The notes are on the side of the award guide page, and they are absolutely critical to the NLI to clarify their understanding of specific circumstances or concerns that might arise in different applications. So it says right in the notes to see lifeguarding situations for additional notes. It also says to design situations that provide opportunities to prevent and respond to inappropriate behaviors, emergencies, and to manage public relations. In cases where a candidate's early intervention prevents the situation from unfolding, provide subsequent opportunity for the candidate to demonstrate rescue skills and procedures. First aid conditions are limited to those outlined in Appendix A and should emphasize problem solving. Auxiliary staff member is untrained, e.g. cashier, maintenance worker. Encourage candidates to don barrier devices at earliest possible moment. A lifeguard acting alone is at higher risk than lifeguards responding as a team. Therefore, single lifeguards should follow the latter approach and employ the lowest risk rescue techniques possible under the circumstances. Rescue aids offer the lifeguard a degree of personal protection. Their use is encouraged. Candidates should practice rescue responses with a variety of rescue techniques. See the alert manual. So there is a lot to unpack on this page, and it is definitely hard when you're first new as an NLI to know what all of these criteria are, because it does require cross-referencing to other pages in the book. So for example, the bullet point effective lifeguard positioning, that's not invented out of thin air. It does require taking your award guide if you're an NLI and flipping to the pertinent award item. Specifically, lifeguard positioning is covered under item 8A, pool supervision, positioning, and rotation. So that has a whole other set of criteria that is then rolled into that single bullet point on lifeguard situations. The same thing occurs with communication. Lifeguard communication is item 7 in the award guide. All of those bullet points are then rolled into that single bullet point on lifeguard situations. So that is one of the reasons, in my personal opinion, that an NLI requires a mentorship. It's a lot of moving pieces and knowing where to cross-reference. I know very early on, one mentorship I did, the NLI candidate, they hadn't finished their co-teach. They were unaware of the first aid must-see charts. So that's another piece. So for example, when it says appropriate first aid treatment if required, in the back of my award guide, I need to flip to the first aid reference charts. So it's going to be Appendix A for me in the current edition, and it is several pages of criteria to be assessed regarding things such as CPR, airway obstruction for conscious child, unconscious victim, conscious infant, respiratory distress, shock, major bleed, stroke, heart attack, angina. So your instructor, your NLI, is therefore flipping between multiple pages. That's why you're going to see them writing copious notes. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. I'm writing down everything I observe that I want to double check or I want to reference. And then in the few minutes between scenarios, I'm flipping through my book to confirm what I saw is accurate to what I need to see. Or you will see some NLIs who have taken these individual pages, photocopied and laminated them so they can easily mark off with a dry erase marker everything they saw an individual do during that particular scenario and track on a report card or in their notes if that scenario was a pass or if that particular scenario does need to be repeated again for the candidate to have the opportunity to be successful. Basically, I have just read all of these simplified must-sees from item 12A. The NLI is also referring to Appendix A for all of the first aid treatment. That is cross-referenced with intermediate first aid. If you are comfortable with your first aid treatment, you've been reviewing and studying, first aid is not going to be the issue. The main thing I would say with new NL candidates is pulling it all together. They are comfortable signaling and entering the water. They're comfortable with their approach and carry. They're comfortable with the first aid treatment, but they don't necessarily have adequate communication with their team or bystanders. They may not start off the scenario with the right aid or correct scanning. They may not demonstrate leadership as the situation progresses when they've got the victim out on deck and are doing treatment and calling for an AED. I can't say every candidate struggles with this, but I would say broadly speaking, with the classes I have seen, there is a lack of confidence and an inability at the beginning to put all the pieces together. For me as an NLI, I very much try to have baby scenarios for my class by day 3 if we're talking a 5-day crash course of 40 hours. I do not want to wait until the afternoon of the 4th day to start scenarios because it is a very steep learning curve in my experience, and I want to give the candidates fair time to improve. Some are going to struggle, some are going to need more time, and it's not a credit to the candidates if I as an instructor don't build in enough time. So that's where I really like to do some baby scenarios on Wednesday, increase the complexity of scenarios, change up the teams on Thursday, and then by Friday morning, we are assessing all of the scenarios for each person. Hopefully we're done by early afternoon. If we need longer, we have that time up until, let's say, at 4 o'clock. In a nutshell, that is the must-see criteria for single guard scenario. Understandably, the criteria for the lifeguard situations team, item 12B, some of it is going to look the same, some of it is going to be different. So the description of item 12B: as a member of a lifeguard team, respond to situations in a supervised aquatic setting. The purpose is to ensure lifeguards can apply lifeguard principles and practices in emergency situations. The learning outcome is that candidates can demonstrate appropriate judgment, knowledge, skill, and fitness while responding to situations in a pool environment. The must-sees are as follows. And as I'm reading through this list, you should differentiate in your mind what I read earlier from a single guard scenario versus a team scenario. They're going to be different in terms of how they're applied and completed. So effective lifeguard positioning. If I'm a single guard, my position in the pool area is going to be different than if I have 2 or 3 or 4 guards with zones. Effective observation skills and scanning techniques, timely recognition and appropriate response, effective performance as a team leader and as a team member in the management of the situation. If I'm the first guard to respond or I'm the backup guard, those are going to be different roles. We are not looking just for leaders. We are also looking for people who can round up the back, do outstanding tasks, really bring it all together. It's not just the first person who responds. Another must-see is effective communication with other lifeguards, assistant lifeguards, victims, patrons, bystanders, and auxiliary staff. My favorite criteria, and I have used this to fail people, is the ability to give direction. That's pretty obvious as a lifeguard, but we also have to be able to receive direction as a lifeguard. That self-awareness, that team mentality can sometimes be a struggle if you're young and you haven't done a lot of group work or you have a different personality. We need to see as NLIs that you are able to also receive and act on the directions of your colleagues, especially if you're the second, third, fourth guard responding. Appropriate selection and effective demonstration of rescue techniques and use of equipment. So the Lifesaving Society has an aid position statement that authorizes you as a National Lifeguard Award holder to select the aid that you feel is most appropriate to the situation, to the aquatic environment, to your own strengths and weaknesses, as well as to the victim. Certain facilities will have occupational requirements that, for example, you use a tube. During an NL original course, unless it is only for staff at a given facility for employment standards, you have the right to use whatever aid you choose based on your skill set and preference. But it needs to make sense for the scenario. What you're doing for a spinal rescue is going to be different from a submerged, from a shallow water. So we need to see appropriate selection and use of equipment, effective use of barrier devices such as pocket mask and gloves, appropriate first aid treatment if required. That's where I would then flip to my first aid appendices and make sure I'm seeing all of my must-sees there for individualized treatment. If I'm dealing with a poison situation, calling poison control or attempting to identify the poison is a must-see of that item. But I only know that because I've been teaching for 10 years. A new NLI or NL candidates would not know that unless you've been reviewing first aid treatment from your intermediate first aid manual, which is one of the few ways I would recommend that you can study during your lifeguard course. Being very strong in first aid is going to boost your confidence and allow you to focus on the lifeguard skills on deck, such as communication, scanning, position and rotation, teamwork, accurate communication with EMS if appropriate at the earliest possible moment. Just a quick tip here. Don't just say, call 911. This needs to be the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why, and if possible, how. I have a middle-aged male at the pool in Okotoks. He slipped and fell. He's unconscious. He's non-responsive. He doesn't have a pulse. I'm starting CPR. I've requested an AED. We are located at the western edge of the pool deck. come back to me when you're done and report on the status of EMS. Do you understand? That's the kind of spiel I am looking for as an instructor. I'm not failing you if it's not exactly what I said, but call 911. Why? Call 911 for what? That is very important for the EMS dispatcher to be able to assign the call the right priority. Continued safety supervision of other patrons throughout, or water cleared if appropriate. In a team environment, first guard may not be the one clearing the pool because they're already in the pool responding. The backup guard or the tertiary guard needs to take responsibility of crowd control or continuing to guard. Where is that information? That's going to take me to item 8. Position and rotation, which is a pool supervision principle. And that's going to take me to lifeguard communication, item 7, in terms of how I give and receive direction, my appropriate use of verbal and nonverbal skills, ability to model trust through clear and open communication, ability to educate patrons about safe practices, ability to provide immediate and accurate communication with others, clear and concise communication with emergency services. There's a lot of details that are covered in the lesson about communication that NL candidates will need to then bring to their demonstration in scenarios. Finishing up with the must-sees for lifeguard situations team, item 12B. There also needs to be good concern for public relations, accurate reporting, and appropriate follow-up. That's going to be calling a parent if it's a child, starting an incident report form, calling a supervisor if appropriate. Then we also need to look at the notes. The notes are going to be very similar to item 12A. Design situations that provide opportunities to prevent and respond to inappropriate behaviors, emergencies, and manage public relations. Inappropriate behaviors could be running on the deck, doing a backflip off the diving board after they've been told not to, not keeping small children within arm's reach. In addition to medical emergencies, public relations such as a swimmer complaining that the water is too cold or the hot tub is closed due to a chemical imbalance. In cases where a candidate's early intervention prevents the situation from unfolding, provide subsequent opportunities for the candidate to demonstrate rescue skills and procedures. What that means is if you diffuse a situation or intervene before it progresses, that's great, but that doesn't remove you from having to be tested on certain scenarios. We as NLIs then have to create other scenarios or opportunities for you to assist as a second or third guard. First aid conditions are limited to those outlined in Appendix A and should emphasize problem solving. This is definitely a point I wanted to make. Over the years, I have seen different National Lifeguard instructors lose the plot and come up with obtuse, crazy, unrealistic scenarios that are not appropriate to the pool deck. We are not going to have an airplane crash in the local pool. Could I, as a lifeguard, respond to an airplane crash? Absolutely. I would go back to basics. It's a major. What are my victims? Do they have ABCs? And then go from there. Is it sometimes fun to have these crazy scenarios later in a course after candidates have achieved mastery? Absolutely. I've thrown out some fun ones over the years, but it is not appropriate earlier to be throwing these curveballs to our candidates for things that are completely unlikely. Intermediate first aid has a variety of items like trench foot, impaled object, a tooth knocked out. Those could happen in an aquatic environment, but the focus is on providing candidates the opportunity to achieve mastery in the items that they are likely to see first and foremost. We're talking nosebleeds, slips, trips, and falls, head injuries, dislocated shoulders. Those are the things that we really want to make sure there's a good awareness. Rescue aids offer a lifeguard a degree of personal protection while providing victim support. Their use is encouraged. Candidates should practice rescue responses with a variety of rescue aids. So back in the day, 2003, when I was first a National Lifeguard candidate, we were expected to do everything solo, from our lifts, our carries. It was this thinking, we're strong and we're able to do these things. Can I lift someone out of the pool on my own? Yes, I've been doing it for 20 years. Can I do so safely without straining my back or legs? Absolutely. But this sheer brute force mentality has shifted. We recognize that often lifeguards are working in a team. If there is not a critical medical emergency, it may make sense to take time getting a backup guard, an assistive device, to get someone out of the pool if they're not immediately at risk. The aid is there to help the lifeguard, to give them assistance. If they lose the aid in the course of a rescue, it happens. If they forget to take it, it happens. They can't go back and get it. But generally, as an NLI, we are looking for opportunities to keep our NL candidates safe in the rescue of the victims. It's not prioritizing the victim's safety and wellness above the lifeguard. So to recap, those are the must-sees of the 2 award items that are included in the National Lifeguard Original course. If you want to be successful at National Lifeguard scenarios, by the last day or by the period that you are being evaluated, you will be personally provided a variety of situations, both as part of a team and individually. I can't specify how many you will receive because it will depend on your class size and course length, but there needs to be a reasonable number of scenarios for you to be assessed after the concept has been taught. Everything else in the National Lifeguard course is being assessed in a variety of different ways. If we talk about the other must-sees, there are concepts that are taught, such as lifeguard theory and practice. Those are taught in the classroom, and then we are looking to see that applied on the pool deck. Demonstration of concepts such as effective pool facility analysis, lifeguard communication, scanning and observation, prevention and intervention, understanding of specialized techniques. There are specific rescues we teach, so you do need to be competent managing a missing person search, management of a distressed or drowning victim, management of submerged non-breathing victims. Those are evaluated separately from situations. They can be rolled into the situations, but the knowledge level is quite high. Management of spinal injured victims, management of an injured victim. There's also your fitness items: rescue drill, underwater swim, object recovery, sprint challenge, endurance challenge. If you have questions about those physical items, I would go and look at my lifeguard recertification video for more detail. There are some basic items such as rescue aid proficiency, entries and removals, that I don't generally find are an issue coming out of the bronze medallion and the assistant lifeguard or the bronze cross course. I can't go through every award guide item I've listed. If you already work at a pool as a swim instructor, or you have a colleague who has been a lifeguard for a while, chat with them and they can help you study if they have been to a lot of in-services. A lot of these criteria should not be a surprise, and they should not be different from facility to facility. The National Lifeguard program is national in Canada, and the award guides, although they might have slight variations branch to branch, province to province, should not be vastly different. A couple other things I wanted to touch on in this video is the situations or scenarios associated with a National Lifeguard recertification. There is an excellent National Lifeguard recertification guide that anybody has access to on the internet. It is publicly available on Google. I will link to it in the video description box below. Recertifications do have specific first aid items and scenarios directed. That doesn't mean I haven't seen, analyze, assess other scenarios, but broadly speaking, there are a specific list of scenarios, both minor and major, from which the NLI is meant to draw from during the course of a recertification. Recertifications are pretty short. In some provinces, they're as little as 4 hours. In other provinces, they're as much as 7 or 8 hours. But that's not a ton of time every 2 years for lifeguards who are not actively working. They may need to brush up on their skills. So the whole idea of this recert guide is for you to prepare before you go to your recertification. Speaking as an NLI who's seen a lot of different types of people come to public recertifications, unfortunately, we cannot reteach you in that short period of time. We may have 5 or 10 minutes to workshop a specific skill or specialized technique at the pool where the recertification is taking place, but we can't just do whatever we want with endless amounts of time because there's a budgeted number of hours on the part of the facility. The minor emergency situations that can be included are asthma, chest pain, hyperventilation, hypoglycemia, where food and fluids are available, basic illness, such as nausea, vomiting that results in pool contamination, heat exhaustion, where fluids are available, burns, as an example, first or second degree on an arm, distressed non-swimmer, DNS, double clutch, minor bleeding from nose, lip, or finger, cramps such as leg, sprain such as ankle, fight such as a kick to the stomach. That doesn't mean we can't riff off of that, but you'll notice there is nothing not likely to happen in a pool. These are all common pool emergencies, at least speaking to the aquatic environments I've worked at in Canada. Asthma after a workout, chest pain after exertion, hyperventilation at a swim meet, hypoglycemia due to starving yourself to fit into a dress and overexercising, illness from dehydration or the flu, heat exhaustion from the summer, etc., etc. The major emergencies that are included for an NL research: anaphylaxis with or without medication, such as EpiPen, seizure on land or water, stroke, such as one-side paralysis and altered LOCs, so level of consciousness, missing child, where, for example, missing child is found chewing gum, choking, and the severe obstruction leads to unconsciousness, fainting, heat stroke, shallow water blackout, aspiration, major bleed, dislocated joint such as shoulder, head injury with scalp laceration, so cut to the face, pool clear such as fire alarm, slip, trip, and fall, broken leg. Same idea. These are emergencies commonly associated with my direct experience in pool environments, right? Can you do something else? Can you have a worker fall off of a ladder? Hypothetically, you could, but given the nature of a recertification, confirming the award holder is still competent and able to complete the skills, we're not here as NLIs to show off and come up with the most extreme situations, a lady giving birth on the pool deck, or, somebody's eyeball popping out. There's just not a purpose served unless we are talking about a tiny NL recertification with all employees and you've completed everything that needs to get done and you just want to have some fun and practice outrageous scenarios. I know some very skilled NLIs who will bring out the fake blood. They will mix and microwave chicken soup from a can with oatmeal to make disgusting, stinky vomit, or they'll use Alka-Seltzer tablets to create foaming in a drowning victim. That can be fun, but we want to be clear in our mind when the NL research is transforming more into an in-service. If it is a workplace environment, that may be appropriate, but in a public NL research scenario, we don't need all the bells and whistles. We as NLIs need to confirm that the candidates are able to complete the must-sees that are required. A recertification does not include every single item from the NL original course evaluation. It is a specific set of items that are marked on the test sheet with a special marking. At the time of this video, it's a cross mark, but it may change depending on the time that you're watching this video and your branch or province. I wanted to mention, we do also have the opportunity when it's not being evaluated to practice other situations and scenarios. So for example, if I am teaching a National Lifeguard course at a summer camp that has a pool, but they're also doing activities on the beach of the lake, it may be appropriate for me to come up with other scenarios once we have completed all of the mandatory items. But it's very clear in the wording of the award guide that we should not be creating other scenarios and other situations outside of the pool scope. It repeatedly says pool environment. Where I think there is a blind spot and a gap for some NLIs is that they don't imagine a pool environment beyond your local community center. So I would encourage you to think about other pool environments that your candidates may encounter, such as a backyard pool, an Airbnb, or a house rental while on vacation pool at a hotel. There are other circumstances that can be brought into play for variety. I've done a number of scenarios with lifeguards where there is electrocution from a fan on the pool deck or the vacuum cord, and one lifeguard goes and gets injured. They're burnt. They go up to the other lifeguard for treatment, and the second lifeguard then goes to try and unplug the fan or unplug the vacuum, and then they get injured. And so we keep doing this until somebody realizes, no, we shouldn't try and unplug the fan or the vacuum. Is there a big focus on electrocution in the NL course? No, but could it be an appropriate use of a burn, realistic to a hot, humid environment where electrical sources can become compromised? Yes. So in my personal opinion, it is an appropriate thing to practice, and also creating that judgment, our knowledge, skills, and attitudes, our KSAs, that we want to see candidates demonstrate. It has also been my experience with young people that sometimes there is a tendency to be helpful, to try and fix things. And that example of electrocution, if they want to solve the problem, I'll just unplug the electrical, and that puts other people at risk. So there are ways that you can make the scenarios more interesting, but if you are just starting out and you need ideas, I would encourage you to take a look at your swim and life-saving instructor manual. At the very back, a lot of people don't use this, and I think it's a missed opportunity. We have Appendix G, and it gives other ideas such as different locations, water conditions, victim descriptions, and victim types. So this would be a good way to get some good variety in your situations and not just doing it off the cuff at the last minute. That is where some of you NL candidates watching this video may feel unprepared, and it is sometimes the responsibility of the NL instructor that you feel that way because they haven't prepared their scenarios well enough in advance. They don't have a structure for how they're going to run scenarios. They're just doing it ad hoc with very little preparation. The other thing I wanted to mention is I do have this excellent list of scenarios I received a very, very long time ago. I cannot take credit whatsoever for this list, but this is an exhaustive list that can provide lots of different ideas for different scenarios. This can be a starting point to pull from. That is basically everything I wanted to say about situations in the National Lifeguard course. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly how your NL instructor will run the course, how they will run scenarios. If you have the opportunity on a break or at the end of the day, catch them and say, look, I'm very nervous. Could you give me guidance on how they're going to be run? They're not going to tell you everything because that's part of the lifeguard training. We want you to be in a dynamic environment and prepared to respond to changing conditions. Hopefully in this video, you've had some good information you can use to better prepare yourself to be successful. If you have ideas for future lifeguard videos or comments, things I missed, please leave those below, and I'm happy to keep making these videos on specific topics. Thank you so much for being here, and I will catch you in the next video.